In this video today, I'm going to talk about temperature control. And it's really important to me now because I just bought this new conical fermenter, an upgrade from what I had before. And in it has the thermal well that I can get very accurate readings. It has a cooling coil to keep the wort fermenting at the right temperature. But what you really need to have is a way to provide a constant cool liquid into that coil to regulate the temperature. And that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today, is how do you do that in lieu of using ice in an ice bath and always having to replenish it. And I'm doing the conversion of this old air conditioner, a bucket of water, which ultimately has some glycol in it, to give me that cooling liquid. Now, as you can see, what I've got so far is really just disassembled this air conditioner I bought on Craigslist, made sure it worked, bent out the cooling coils, made sure that I wouldn't damage it in that process, because that's kind of a bit of the trick of it all, and everything sure enough worked. So I'm pretty excited about it. The next step is going to be to go ahead and really get it in more operational condition, have it be something I can be proud at and look at, and I'll show those and discuss the steps with you at that point in time. So here we go. Let's start by looking at the tools that I use for the project. As you can see, mostly simple hand tools. I also then started with the air conditioner that was a 5,000 BTU unit, which is common for these type of projects. From that, I took apart the outer casing, the internal fan, internal thermostat, and went ahead and stripped it down so it was ready for use. Once I got to that point, I went ahead and bent the coil out, which is really sort of the tricky part because you don't want to crack that copper tubing at all. And I installed it into just a cooler full of water to make sure the air conditioner itself worked and that it was actually cooling down. From there, I took a look inside after running the unit for just a few minutes, and if you look closely at the bottom there, you can start to see ice forming on the coils. This is because at this point in time I only had water in the cooler. There was no glycol. So clearly the coils are getting plenty cold enough to cool down the water bath. From there I decided to start to really put it into the form that I needed for the project. So I took everything apart, spread it out, and disconnected the controller unit, the thermal sensor, and hardwired all of the wiring to the start run capacitor there, and that's the only thing that was left. No other switches, sensors, or anything, so that when the unit comes on, it's going to come on full blast and cool as much as possible. The other thing I did is trim down the bottom base plate there so it could be as compact as possible. There's a picture of the housing that I decided to keep, thinking I might be able to use it once the project was done. From there I went ahead and started on the controller unit that was going to control the temperature of the glycol bath itself. I used the Inkbird controller here, which I have to say worked out really well. Here's a picture just installing it in the little project box that I had. And realistically, this was one of the more difficult parts of the whole task. I went ahead with the wiring. I had done an STC 1000 before, and it's basically the same thing. So it really went together pretty well. From there, I did a check with the cooler I would be using. I had to get this bigger one because I needed a taller unit. And here you can see how close I could get the cooler to the back part of the air conditioning unit because I did take the time to cut down that bottom sheet metal base plate. Here's a picture of the unit from the front, and then a picture inside to show how the coil actually sits inside there. You can also start to see how I fed the coils from the air conditioner through the cooler and on back to the coils. A pretty simple scheme when all was said and done. After that, I went ahead and assembled it all together. I have the controller set up on the side there. Really it's good to go, apart from just cutting down that wooden base a bit. But before I went ahead and plugged the air conditioner, I thought, well, I might as well make sure I wired everything correctly by using this little test lamp in place of the air conditioner itself. So here we have the final unit actually in operation. You can see I have the conical fermenter right next to it. Let's start with it. We have the lines coming in from the glycol chiller to the top of the coil there. One in, one out. The pump that's inside of the glycol chiller is controlled by the temperature sensor that's in the thermal well right there in the center. That basically will turn the cooling glycol from the reservoir to the conical based on what the temperature setting is of this particular unit. Now that unit's an STC 1000, so it only runs in centigrade, so I'm at 19 degrees, which is what, about 67 degrees? One thing I'll note is on the back, for the power to the pump, I actually have an extra manual switch, so I can be sure to turn it off when the unit's not in service. The temperature for the glycol itself is controlled by the Inkbird down there at the bottom. If you remember from the slides, that's the unit that I put together and installed for this project. So again, I would say this. The project was overall a little easier than I thought. Going slow and taking it easy, making sure not to damage your coil when you bend it out, is probably the most important part. But with little steady and easy constant pull on the coil, it actually moved quite easily. So there you have it. The unit works great. I've brewed about 5 batches now using it, both lagers and ales, and really could not be any happier. Total price, I'm going to say is about $250 by the time you add in all the caster wheels and tubes and all the little extra stuff with it. So pretty economical. If you're interested in this project, feel free to hit me with some comments or questions. I'll be glad to answer them, and I encourage you to give it a try. Thanks so much.